Hey, we need to talk about SEPTA because SEPTA's not doing too good right now for multiple reasons. So I'm doing this quick video on this because a bigger video is coming out very soon. But I can't do the big video too soon because then it might be out of date immediately. So we're going to do this for now. And honestly, I might do more videos that are like this where it's essentially me talking to OBS and then kind of going through a few things with you about a certain subject because I think this is way easier to do than to edit through a whole big thing. Anyway, on the screen currently, this is SEPTA's Doomsday map they released a while ago. This was released in like, I think 2 years ago when they were first initially running into the fact that they were running out of COVID funding or the COVID relief fund, whatever it was called. Here on the map, you will see certain things are missing or gone. The trolleys are all gone. And then they have anything with a stop sign looking like this means that it essentially the service will be limited or cut back. Obviously, the Broad Street line just gets cut back from South Philly completely. And there's a bunch of things missing, like the 102 and then Kenwood line and a few other things. What we have to remember is that this is the worst case scenario possible. I don't actually believe any of this stuff will happen to a slight extent, but this was put out kind of you have to tell people like, hey, the worst case that we don't get any funding, this is what's going to happen, and it gets people motivated. But what we have to talk about is now the actual funding that comes from the PA government has been pushed back. Because, well, actually, first let's look at this sheet. So this is the cut up of how SEPTA is generally funded. You can see in this graph here. The blue is the state subsidy, the green is fares and whatnot, and then there's your federal relief fund, which is the light blue, and then you have like your local, local subsidies are mixed with state. But you can see like when the relief stuff is runs out, you can see it's you have a big gap in funding. Now the problem with this is that like if you see this budget, you'll be like, why are they cutting so much service if it's just that little bit? The problem is that transit doesn't really work in like a linear fashion. It's very logarithmic because essentially it takes a lot of money to just store, run, and operate trains, but the more trains you run, it's not necessarily more expensive, like linearly, the more trains you run, because now you have all the tracks, you have all the equipment, you have all of the maintenance facilities. Running more trains doesn't necessarily mean you need to buy all of those new things again. So the problem with this little gap is that SEPTA has already been kind of at the edge of where they're at. And the thing is that once you cut services, the problem is that modern transit is based on fares, and that's sort of how it's always been. And so they kind of like talk about down here at the bottom, it's like once you cut services, you get jobs and fare increases, and ridership falls apart. And then once ridership falls apart, even if it only takes up that small chunk, it's like if that was cut in half, then you have to deal with so much more budget loss. So right now, SEPTA is looking for funding. It's about 200. It was 240 million, but the state, like I said, gave a one-time funding thing that would at least get them into 2025. So there's two things here to take away from this. One is that we need to advocate for the agency. Generally, when people are like talking about any of this stuff, you sort of have to talk about why SEPTA is actually beneficial. What does it get us? Essentially allows the Philadelphia region to be as dense as it is, and not totally gridlocked, and people have other options in driving. So obviously SEPTA is a good thing in that aspect. And honestly, our regional rail is so unique compared to everywhere else in the US. So just talking about this stuff, especially to people in rural PA, because that's the main problem. The main problem here is that the Pennsylvania government has a House and a Senate, and just like the federal House and Senate, of course, the Senate in PA is not going to be as what's the term? It's not going to be as equitable because you get certain senators from different spots in the state, no matter how much population is there. And unfortunately, there's a lot of rural Republicans that do not like Philadelphia. And it doesn't matter if it helps them in the long run or helps their county through funding through the city. putting back into the state fund, doesn't matter. They just don't like the city at all, and they don't like anything to do with the city, and they don't understand SEPTA. So we need a few things, and we need to talk about one or two things. The first is that we need to advocate for SEPTA and talk about this funding stuff. And there's like a whole article which I'll link that's about this stuff, and I'll link these like fact sheets or whatever that I'll be using eventually in the big thing. But there's two things which I've been told. One is that technically the session till the end of the year is over, so the Senate does not meet again. So that means that technically the Senate cannot vote on the actual transportation funds. So that means SEPTA is kind of stuck till the end of the year. And if we go down here, you have the sort of timeline of SEPTA, and it pretty much says that is like when they have to start worrying is in January. January is when the budget effectively you start to have issues and you start to have to cut something. We need to get something done by then, and there's some things that I think might happen. One is that the highway appropriation or emergency funds might be appropriated to SEPTA. That is through Josh Shapiro, aka the governor, and I'm kind of frustrated with him because I don't think that he's pushed this issue enough into the public and explained to people why this is such a beneficial thing to everyone in the state, not just outside of Philly. So this is our timeline. This is what we're looking at. Right now, we just passed the adjustment hearings, and the SEPTA board is going to consider the fare hike soon. The fare hike will go from $2 to $2.50, which not terrible, but still, like for the poorest people in the city, I don't want them to have to deal with that. And that's another thing, is that just like this is an equality thing or an equability thing, whatever, for the state. It's like this is generally you're taking from the city more than you're giving back. The Philadelphia gives almost like double, I think, the amount to the state than the state gives back to Philadelphia. And that's to support all the rural communities, but the Republicans don't think about that. They don't think about the city actually being a beneficial thing to them. And so two things we need to do with this is, one, you need to talk and yell at our elected officials here in Pennsylvania, but also there is an election coming up. Obviously, I live here in Philadelphia, so I'm registered here in Pennsylvania. But if you are in Pennsylvania, especially in a place where you can vote for the local Pennsylvania senators, so not the federal ones, the state ones, if you can vote for the Democrats, they are generally trying to save transit in the state. And not only SEPTA, but a lot of other agencies that are in the state, including Pittsburgh and like Scranton and Allentown. They're trying to fund all that stuff. And unfortunately, the Republicans keep getting in front of all of this. So if you can talk to people and convince anyone in the state that this is a big thing, and especially down ballot people, like obviously the federal election is important, but the down ballot people, and you can get Republicans voted out in different Pennsylvania counties for Senate, that is the big thing that's kind of affecting us right now, because the Senate is the main hurdle that you have to get past. And you know, the Republicans, they're all just going to come up with some excuse or just not care. They don't care. They would rather shoot themselves in the foot, but shoot the other person in the foot at the same time, than actually fund stuff and see everything prosper. And that's the problem, is that they'd rather drag everyone down with them instead of actually supporting and building up the state. So that's kind of where we're at. Also, Leslie Richards, the SEPTA GM, has stepped down. I don't know the exact details. Allegedly, the SEPTA board has actually asked her to step down, and it wasn't related to this stuff. So I actually don't know necessarily what's going on, but I think that she just doesn't want to be connected to fare hikes and anything else. But if that's the case, that's super, super lame. Like, come on, I'd stick around and ride the ship down. Like, I'd try to like promote. Anyway, I think what's happening is that she is close to Josh Shapiro, and she must know something everyone else doesn't, or at least the SEPTA board does, or at least the SEPTA board is tired of dealing with her. I don't know what's up. The information will come out. That's part of the reason why I didn't make a video yet about it. But Yeah. So the main two things to take away from this are talk about SEPTA, talk about why it's useful for Philadelphia and all the transit benefits that we always talk about, and that how it applies to people in rural communities in Pennsylvania. And then the other thing is, if you live in Pennsylvania or if you know someone in Pennsylvania, vote down ballot for the senators for the state to vote Democrat if you want transit to be saved. Honestly, just in general, because they're shitheads. But for the most part, if we want transit to be saved, you have to vote down ballot, and those are very, very, very important reasons to vote. Obviously, the federal election is this year, and there's a lot running on this. I'll make another video about that. But anyway, hopefully SEPTA will turn out good. I have optimistic or positive views on what's going to happen, and I can only hope for the best. I think that we're in a spot in the country where transit is not going to be overlooked at this point, and it's not going to be something which we're going to disinvest in. So I don't think that's going to happen, but it's just frustrating that we have to deal with this. Maybe in a future video, I'll talk about how we could get a funding model where we don't even have to deal with this, or don't even have to go through this whole charades. But yeah, if you enjoyed this type of video where it's just me talking about some of this stuff, let me know. I'll have these documents linked below. Otherwise, yeah, I should have some other projects out soon. I'm trying to get back in the saddle with a lot of these projects because I've been very behind. Anyway, we'll see you guys in the next one.